Shocking Filipino genetic origins revealed by scientists. Actually, a ton of you have been tagging me in this, and for good reason. Scientists just uncovered something wild. The genetic origins of Filipinos might rewrite human history. For real. They always told us we were a footnote, a post-colonial byproduct. But what if we were actually the first chapter? What if the Philippines isn't just a beautiful, vibrant paradise, but the cradle of mankind itself? Where ancient bones scream louder than textbooks, and lost civilizations whisper, we were here first. This isn't just science, it's a reckoning. A comeback. A reclaiming. So buckle up, because if what they're saying is true, everything you've been told about where we come from? Dead wrong. You ever feel like the world has been feeding you the same damn story your whole life? You're Filipino? Oh yeah, y'all were colonized by the Spanish, right? That's what they reduce us to, colonized people. A nation discovered, like we were some blank page waiting for the Europeans to scribble on. Like our history didn't exist before some dude in tights showed up waving a Bible and a flag. Nah. I'm done letting that narrative slide. You should be too. Because here's the truth they don't teach you in school. Filipinos didn't just appear after 1521. We didn't start our story with colonization. That's like walking into a movie halfway through and acting like you know the plot. Nope. Our history runs so deep, it makes Western timelines look like TikTok videos. Quick, shallow, and mostly fake. Now finally, scientists are waking up. Genetic studies, yeah real science, not my grandpa said, are revealing that Filipino roots go way further back than anyone's been giving us credit for. We're talking ancient migrations before the pyramids, before Christ, before history textbooks even knew what to call Asia. Our ancestors weren't lost islanders. They were navigators, builders, survivors. They didn't get here by accident. They knew what the hell they were doing. But do they teach that in school? Nah. They teach you Magellan, like he invented your island. Like he came in peace. Spoiler alert, he didn't. That man got murked by Lapu-Lapu, remember? And they still gave him a statue. Wild. Meanwhile, the bones, the genes, the artifacts, they've been screaming the truth this whole time. But nobody listened. Because it didn't fit the Western narrative. Too inconvenient, right? If Filipinos were thriving before colonizers showed up, then that ruins the whole white savior script. And let's not even talk about how they made us feel like we were late to the table of civilization. Like everyone else was eating steak and wine while we were figuring out coconuts. Please. You ever tried opening a coconut without tools? That's advanced science, my guy. But I get it. It's hard to accept you've been lied to. That your whole identity, your whole self-worth, was built on someone else's BS version of your story. That's why this stuff matters. This isn't just about history. It's about your place in the world. Your confidence. Your kids growing up knowing they come from something powerful, not just poverty, colonization, and karaoke. Although let's be real, Filipinos do dominate karaoke. That's scientifically proven. So yeah, be mad. Be furious. Not just at the lies, but at how long you've been swallowing them like they were gospel. Because now, the evidence is on our side. DNA doesn't lie. And it's saying loud and clear. We were never just a colony. We were never an afterthought. We were the damn origin. So don't you dare let them write you out of the story again. Not now. Not ever. Now let's talk about the real first settlers. You think colonizers discovered the Philippines? Cute. Try 50,000 years too late, buddy. While they were still figuring out fire and trying not to die from eating the wrong berries, we already had people thriving here. Climbing cliffs, hunting, fishing, surviving tsunamis barefoot. I'm talking about the Negritos. And no, that's not a nickname you give your neighbor's dog. It's the name of the first known humans in the Philippines. These weren't just cavemen running around in loincloths yelling, "Ooga booga." These were skilled, small-framed, dark-skinned hunter-gatherers. They walked here, yes walked from Africa, through coastal routes and ancient land bridges, before GPS, before Google Maps, before Crocs were even invented. Let that sink in. But let me guess, you didn't hear about them in school either, right? Why would you? They don't fit the narrative. They don't look like heroes in Disney movies. They're not light-skinned conquerors with horses and shiny armor. They're barefoot legends with thousand-year bloodlines, and that makes people uncomfortable. See the Ita, Agta, Batak, these indigenous groups still walking among us today, carry some of the oldest DNA in Southeast Asia. Let me say that again for the folks in the back, oldest DNA in Southeast Asia. We're talking genetics that predate temples, emperors, and every empire that ever tried to civilize us. And yet, how do we treat them today? We push them to the margins. Treat them like folklore. Like they're side characters in their own land. Meanwhile, every selfie-happy tourist wants to go see the exotic tribes, like it's a human safari. Oh wow, look at the Ita kids, they're so cute. Cute. Bro, they're walking living history, not mascots for your vacation vlog. Imagine being descended from the OGs of human migration and watching people act like your story started in the 1500s. That's disrespect on a historic level. The Negritos weren't primitive. They were resilient. They lived off the land, mastered survival, and maintained culture without needing social media clout or 5-step skincare routines. And they're still here. Still singing their chants, hunting in the forests, still holding the line between modern chaos and ancient truth. And yet, how many of us even know their names? We cry about identity while ghosting the very people who define it. Look, I'm not saying we all have to become anthropologists overnight. But if you're walking around with Filipino pride, throwing up that flag emoji on Independence Day, and you don't know the story of the Negritos, you're missing the first chapter. They weren't just the beginning of the Filipino story, they're the proof that we've always been here, that we didn't come late. We started the damn race. So next time someone talks to you like you came from nothing, tell them about the ETA. Tell them about the AGTA. Tell them about DNA so old it's practically fossilized flex. Because they were the foundation. And you? You're the legacy. Let me guess, when you hear migration, your brain goes straight to people fleeing somewhere bad, arriving somewhere worse, holding a cardboard sign and chasing hope in flip-flops. Nah, that's not this story. We're talking 4,000 years ago when a group of absolute navigational savages, the Austronesians, left Taiwan, looked at the endless Pacific Ocean, and said, yeah, let's just wing it. With boats. Boats. Not cruise ships. No Wi-Fi. Just stars, sea, and some seriously massive confidence. Now, here's where your history teacher probably got lazy. Because this next part is not about erasure, it's about integration. The Austronesians didn't show up, wipe out the Negritos, and do a hard reset. This wasn't delete and overwrite. This was merge and enhance. They came in with farming techniques, pottery, and maritime skills so next level, modern engineers still can't figure out how they pulled it off. They intermarried with the Negritos, blended bloodlines, and boom, you got the early version of what we now call the Filipino identity. Let that sit for a second. Your bloodline isn't some colonizer footnote. It's an upgrade pack, a full genetic mashup between the OG humans of Southeast Asia and the ocean-going tacticians of the Pacific. That's not ancestry. That's an origin story. But here's the part that makes my eyeballs twitch. We treat this story like background noise. Like it's the small print at the bottom of a contract we never bothered to read. Why? Because we were spoon-fed this idea that we're accidental Filipinos, like the archipelago was just a waiting room for colonization to make us real. No. We weren't waiting. We were evolving. Trading. Farming. Sailing. While Europe was still playing with swords and dying from water diseases, we were navigating open seas with nothing but stars and coconut logic. But we've been programmed to downplay that. To act like we didn't exist until some guy with a feather hat and a superiority complex showed up yelling, I claim this island. Bro. People were living here. Loving, losing, building, burning, fighting, forgiving. You don't get to discover what's already built. The Austronesian migration is not just a blip on a timeline, it's the foundation of your mom's rice cooker. Your dad's boat jokes. Your karaoke obsession. It's in your Tagalog, Bisaya, Ilocano. It's in the way we gesture with our lips instead of fingers. That's heritage, baby. So next time someone tells you your people came from somewhere else, tell them, yes we did, and we brought lunch, tools, and ocean maps with no GPS. We weren't born out of survival, we were born out of strategy. Calculated expansion. A civilization before anyone gave us permission to be one. Because Filipino identity didn't start in 1521. It started when Negrito met Austronesian, and history stopped being theory, and became blood. Now ask yourself this. If this was never taught, what else did they hide from you? So by now you're probably thinking, okay, so Negritos came, Austronesians arrived, we mixed, cool. No. Not done. Because history wasn't like some family reunion that ended after dessert. It was a freaking airport terminal, and everybody had a layover in the Philippines. Vietnamese. Thai. Malaysians. Indians. Chinese. Arabs. They didn't just pass through. They stayed. They traded. They dated. And guess what? We let them. Not because we were weak, but because we were strategic. You know what's smarter than trying to rule the world? Trading with it. See, here's the part that gets swept under the rug like your grandma's karaoke machine after a blackout. The Philippines wasn't some sleepy island waiting to be colonized. We were already a cultural blender set to max, long before Magellan pulled up thinking he was about to gentrify paradise. Let's rip the band-aid off. Your genes? Not pure. Your culture? Not singular. And that's not a flaw. That's your superpower. Because while the West was out there gatekeeping borders and purity like insecure prom chaperones, we were out here absorbing the best of everyone who passed through. You like pancit? Chinese influence. You enjoy sarong-style clothing? Malay and Thai. Your uncle's prayer beads and your auntie's turmeric home remedy? Arab and Indian. Oh, and your obsession with gold jewelry and seafood? You're welcome. That's centuries of Southeast Asian flexing. This isn't we got influenced. This is we curated an empire of taste, trade, and tongue, and had the nerve to make it look effortless. And yet, we act like we're borrowing someone else's history. Why? Because deep down, we've been taught to worship clarity, to crave neat little boxes. But you're not a box. You're a vortex. A genetic Wikipedia page with no citations and way too many open tabs. And you still work. Let me drop this on you real quick. Modern studies show that Filipinos carry genetic signals from at least 5 different major regional populations. In some parts of Luzon and Visayas, that genetic soup has so many spices it could qualify as a Michelin star dish. You think that's a weakness? No. That's a biological cheat code. We don't just adapt. We absorb, remix, and evolve. But here's the part that stings. We hide it. We downplay it. We act like we're embarrassed to be complex. Why? Because being proud is easier when it's simple. But if your heritage was a food court, you'd own every stall. From Vietnamese pho to Malay satay to Chinese dumplings, you don't pick one. You are the plate. So next time you feel disconnected from your roots, remember this: you're not lost. You're everywhere. You are the intersection, not the passenger. You are not borrowed history. You're the marketplace it came through. And if that's not worth standing tall for, I don't know what is. Let's talk about something most people tiptoe around like it's a slippery puddle of fish sauce: Chinese influence. Oh yeah, you heard me. That side of you that loves discount bundles, has a secret family recipe for lumpia, and hoards empty biscuit cans full of thread and expired batteries? That's not just Filipino. That's Pinoy legacy, baby. Here's the cold, hard truth. Southern Chinese traders were here before Philippines was even a word. Over 1,000 years ago, these dudes were already sailing into our harbors like, yo, what's good? Got gold? Got rice? Got daughters? And yes, they stayed. They didn't just drop off porcelain and bounce. They settled. They built. They married your Lola. And now you've got her nose, her work ethic, and maybe her inability to express love without food. And look, this isn't about erasing anyone. This is about facing what's always been there but nobody wants to talk about unless it's Chinese New Year and there's free taikoy. Let's really cut through the fake modesty for a second. That businessman uncle who owns 5 sorry stores, a logistics company, and still manages to fit in 3 mahjong nights a week? Chinese ancestry. That friend in Cebu who has dim sum every Sunday and a nose bridge that screams surgical precision? Chinese roots. And what do we do with this information? We pretend it's just a coincidence. We downplay it. We act like all of this influence just magically appeared, like soy sauce fell from the sky and landed in our pancit. Nah. It was intentional integration. They brought their spice, their silk, their savvy, and most importantly, their system. You know why Filipino-Chinese businesses dominate malls, hardware chains, and food distribution? Because they started playing chess when the rest of us were busy trying to finish Sungka. Now before you get in your feelings, this ain't about superiority. It's about strategy. The Chinese didn't come here to conquer with swords. They came with silks, smiles, and survival instincts sharper than your aunt's eyebrow tattoo. And guess what? That DNA got in us. We didn't just inherit it, we live it. Every time you hustle a side gig, every time you flip ukiukai finds online for triple the price, every time you tell yourself, save first, spend later, that's the echo of 1,000 years of Chinatown hustle whispering in your bloodline. But what do? We bury it under Catholic guilt and colonial leftovers. We joke about being curipot like it's shameful, when really, it's survival at its finest. Don't be too Chinese, huh? As if being smart with money is suddenly a crime? Stop acting surprised that so many urban Filipinos, especially in Manila and Cebu, are walking proof of this blend. It's not a subplot. It's core lore. So the next time someone says, may dugong insik yen, don't flinch. Smile. Because that means your blood knows how to build, barter, and never back down. You're not just Filipino. You're Filinoinese entrepreneurial sorcery with extra chili oil. And that's not something to hide. That's your genetic business card. You know what nobody wants to talk about unless it's for some weak trivia night or to sound smart at a party. South Asian and Middle Eastern influence on the Philippines. Yeah, I said it. And before you roll your eyes and act like this part of history was just a passing breeze, let me grab you by the collar of denial and drag you into some real talk. Indian traders and Arab seafarers were here by the 9th century. Not 900 AD like it's ancient myth. Nope. They were out there cruising into our islands, while Europe was still trying to figure out how toilets work. And these weren't just guys selling rugs and beads. These were full-on cultural ambassadors with religion, math, scripts, and spices that made your ancestors' food actually taste like something. You think your love for chicken curry came from YouTube tutorials? No. That's genetic memory, my guy. Let's talk about butuan. Ever heard of it? No? Exactly. Because most of y'all treat pre-Spanish history like it's an optional side quest. Butuan was an Indianized kingdom, with boats, trade, and gold crafts that would make your favorite influencer's haul look like junk shop clearance. Same with Cebu. That island wasn't just a stopover for tourists and lechon. It was a buzzing maritime hub long before Magellan pulled up with his god complex and got a spear through the chest. And yes, there's genetic evidence. Real science. Not kismis. Your blood tells the story your textbooks skipped. Especially in Mindanao, where the mix runs deep. Indian, Arab, Malay, indigenous. That ain't chaos, that's complexity. And yet somehow, we still treat this heritage like a glitch in the Filipino matrix. Oh, Malayhing Muslim yen. You say that like it's a plot twist, when really, it's the main storyline. Here's the part that stings. We inherited philosophy, astronomy, numbers, music, and actual written scripts, and we threw most of it away because the colonizers told us it didn't match their vibe. We traded Sanskrit-based Baybayin for Spanish surnames. We swapped spiritual traditions older than Christianity for guilt-driven novenas. We had epics, legends, kings, and we buried them under rosaries and repression. You ever wonder why your Lola's stories sound more mythical than your history books? Because they are. Because we've sanitized our past so much it smells like rubbing alcohol, and just as sterile. And don't get me started on the people who still pretend Mindanao isn't Filipino enough. You think just because someone says Assalamu alaikum instead of Kamusta ka, now they're not your Kababayan? They've got more ancestral receipts than most of Luzon combined. So let's make this clear. You're not just Filipino. You're a walking archive of seafaring South Asians, sandalwood traders, script-bearing scholars, and spice-hardened survivalists. You're a mix of drum beats, incense smoke, and ancient scrolls. You're not bland. You're layered. You're not confused, you're complicated. So stop acting like your roots start at Spanish invasion. Because long before the West knew we existed, the East already shaped who we are. And that, my friend, is not a subplot. That's the origin story. Let's be real for a second. You ever look around and realize your entire country still has a Spanish hangover? 125 years after the breakup? It's like getting dumped in the 1800s and still using your ex's last name because it sounds classy. Yeah, I said it. Spanish colonization wasn't just a phase, it was an identity theft that lasted 3 centuries. That's not a colonizer. That's a live-in landlord who changed your locks and still charged rent. They showed up in 1521 with a cross, a sword, and enough entitlement to rename an entire archipelago after some European prince who couldn't even point us out on a map. And what did we do? We gave them land, labor, and loyalty, and they gave us surnames and Sunday guilt. De la Cruz, Santos, Reyes. Ever wonder why half the country sounds like the cast of a telenovela no one asked for? Because we were assigned names like cattle tags. Not earned. Not chosen. Just here, take the Spanish name so we can count you better. Gracias? No gracias. And let's not even pretend Catholicism came with hugs and hallelujahs. It came with forced baptisms, burned manuscripts, and a one-way ticket to spiritual gaslighting. Oh, you don't believe in our God? Cool, enjoy the steak. Literally. Here's a stat to ruin your next coffee break. Over 80% of Filipinos today are Roman Catholic. Now ask yourself, how many of those people actually understand Catholic doctrine? Because it ain't faith if it's inherited under threat. But wait, it gets better. They didn't just take our land. They took our tongues. Tagalog got peppered with Spanish like it was a struggling soup in need of seasoning. Mesa, Cilia, tender. Our vocabulary is basically a hostage situation, and the ransom was fluency. And let's talk DNA. Yes, Spanish blood entered the pool, but not like some romantic historical drama with soft violin music. No. It came through power, coercion, and exploitation. Highest concentrations? Luzon and Visayas. Why? Because that's where the Spanish set up shop, and where the systems of conversion and civilization hit hardest. But here's the punchline nobody wants to say out loud. We celebrate the very things that broke us. We hold fiestas for saints that replaced our gods. We speak proudly in borrowed words. We praise skin tones that came from colonizers we never invited. It's like Stockholm Syndrome, but with lechen and mass schedules. Now don't get me wrong, there's beauty in resilience. In the way Filipinos took broken pieces and made something unshakably warm and welcoming. But let's not romanticize a cultural mugging. Let's call it what it was, a 300-year demo of what happens when you let someone decorate your house and then forget it was ever yours. So the next time someone tells you Spanish colonization gave us culture, tell them we already had one. We just forgot what it looked like underneath the rosaries, red wine, and royal nonsense. This ain't about erasing history. It's about owning it, fully, fiercely, and finally. Because you're not just Filipino. You're the descendant of survivors. Of resistors. Of people who lost everything, but not themselves. And that's more powerful than any crown. Let's get one thing straight. You are more Mexican than you think. Yeah, I know, you're clutching your lumpia like PSH, no way. But listen close, because this part of history isn't just dusty textbooks and forgotten maps. It's in your cheekbones. Your last name. Maybe even your telenovela-level drama instincts. You ever wonder why your Tita watches La Rosa de Guadalupe like it's her moral compass? You think it's just about Jesus and flower petals? Nah, that is ancestral memory speaking Spanish with a Filipino accent. Here's the twist no one bothered to tell you in school. The Philippines and Latin America weren't just Facebook friends. We were in a 250-year long-distance relationship. The Manila-Acapulco galleon trade wasn't just shipping silver and silk, it was shipping people. Settlers, soldiers, sailors, slaves. From Mexico, from Peru, straight into our islands, and straight into our gene pool. Now here comes the sting. You know those Spanish-style churches you're forced to smile in during family reunions? They were built by Mexicans. Literally. The engineering plans, the bricks, the dam bells. Imported. Mexican soldiers, settled in Pampanga. Peruvian miners, dumped in Zambales. Indigenous Latinos, African slaves, mixed-race Criollos, all thrown into the mix like a human halo. And guess what? Genetic tests back it up. Filipino DNA shows clear traces of indigenous Latin American ancestry, especially in families from coastal towns once buzzing with galleon activity. But we don't talk about it. Why? Because it doesn't fit the neat little narrative we've been spoon-fed. Spain colonized us, the end. Cute story. But Spain outsourced half the dirty work to the Americas. Spain was the boss. Mexico? That was the regional manager with way too much authority and not enough supervision. Here's a metaphor you'll never unhear. Filipino identity is like a jeepney built from Latin American parts, painted with Asian colors, and driven by someone who still thinks they're heading to Spain. We look one way. We speak another. We act like we invented warmth, rhythm, and family drama, but a huge chunk of that? Latin American by osmosis. But here's the real kick in the ribs. We erased that connection. Ask a random Filipino what they know about the galleon trade. They'll give you that dead-eyed stare we save for awkward buffet line conversations. We know more about K-dramas than we do about the Mexican sailors who literally raised our great-great-great Lolo. So what now? Start recognizing your full reflection. Because your roots don't stop in Asia. They stretch across oceans. They echo in salsa beats, in borrowed words, in the emotional chaos we call Filipino hospitality. This isn't a guilt trip. It's a wake-up call. You're not just Asian. You're the lost cousin at the Latin family reunion, late to the party, but definitely on the guest list. So next time you hear a mariachi tune and feel your foot tap, that's not coincidence. That's blood memory. And it's dancing. Let's clear this up right now. You were never just colonized. You were tested, rewritten, and still didn't break. But here's the part no one dares to say out loud. We act like survivors, but think like victims. Every time someone says, we were colonized for 300 years, it's like we wear it as a personality badge. Like, hi, I'm Filipino, sun sign, oppressed. Please. You think the Spaniards erased our identity? Nah, they just failed to overwrite it. They threw their flags, their gods, their fake superiority, and we looked them dead in the eyes and said, cool. We'll take what's useful, and the rest? You can shove it next to your rusty armor. Filipinos are not the erased. We are the editors. We didn't lose our culture. We downloaded theirs and added it to the playlist. Catholicism? Sure, we made it look like ours. Spanish surnames? We slapped De La Cruz next to a banana tree and called it family. American English? Thanks, now we can out-call center the world. We absorbed them. We survived them. And that survival? It's not just some kumbaya-sounding resilience quote on a tourist pamphlet. It's in our bones. Literally. Our DNA looks like a who's who of historical chaos. Chinese, Indian, Latin American, Arab, Spanish, Malay, Polynesian, Negrito. We are a human buffet, and guess what? It works. Because every invasion, every colonizer, every outsider that tried to break us, just added flavor. Let's put it in food terms, because that's how we all secretly process trauma. Other cultures are lasagna. Neat layers. Clear ingredients. Filipinos? We are sinigang. A sour, steamy chaos of whatever's left in the fridge. And it still slaps. But here's the gut punch. Despite all that richness, we still act like we need validation. We ask, am I Western enough? Do I look mestizo enough to be pretty? Is my English good enough to be respected? Stop it. We didn't survive centuries of cultural whiplash to now beg for approval on TikTok. Your ancestors didn't escape slavery, dodge colonizers, survive typhoons, and raise 10 kids on boiled rice just for you to feel ashamed of your wide nose or your dark skin. They didn't pass on trauma, so you could shrink into politeness. So here's the truth they won't print on your birth certificate. You're a genetic fortress. A remix of empires. A cultural Frankenstein stitched together with rebellion, prayer, jokes, and low blood sugar. Stop playing small. Stop pretending your heritage is some watered-down off-brand Asia. You're not the diluted version, you're the concentrate. So next time someone asks, what are you really? Look them dead in the eyes and say, I'm what's left after every empire failed. And then walk away like your Lola just won a cockfight. You needed a spit tube and a lab coat to tell you what your grandma already knew? OMG, I'm 12% Polynesian. Really? You had to swab your cheek to figure out why you dance like a wave and argue like a storm? Filipinos, we've become so disconnected, we need white coats and lab techs to rediscover what's literally in our blood. Let that sink in. Now look, I'm not anti-science. I'm pro-truth. And the truth is, your DNA is not a quiz result, it's a damn war story. Denisovans? Those ancient humans you're connected to? Yeah, they were literally prehistoric jungle warriors. They climbed mountains with no shoes, no Spotify, and no aircon, and you're out here struggling to climb out of bed for your 9 to 5. Don't disrespect them like that. Polynesians? Those aren't your distant cousins. Those are your ocean surfing, star charting, coconut throwing family members. They didn't use GPS, they invented it with the sky. Meanwhile, you're using Waze to find a Jollibee 2 blocks away. Austronesians? Oh please. That's not a heritage group, that's a fleet of sea bosses who explored more islands than you've had romantic rejections. They carved out civilizations with nothing but paddles and big dreams. And you're afraid to take a new job because you might not be ready? Here's the problem. We treat identity like a costume, something you only put on for fiestas and college essays. But identity isn't about clothing or TikTok dances or Quillet slang. It's blood deep. And it's been ignored so long, we needed a lab to remind us. But you know what? Fine. Let modern science play the role of the stern tita who finally tells you the family gossip. Because now you know. You know your genes didn't come from nowhere. You didn't just pop out under Spanish rule and start singing karaoke. You are the living proof of survival. Of fusion. Of forgotten empires. So why, seriously why, are we still living like we're lost? Why are we still obsessed with Western beauty standards, foreign approval, and watered-down versions of our own history? You ever wonder why people outside the Philippines romanticize your culture more than you do? Because they see what we ignore. They see the fire in your lineage. They see that you come from explorers, warriors, and rebels who knew how to build a nation, while we're here taking BuzzFeed quizzes to see which Filipino snack we are. Modern science didn't tell us who we are. It just reminded us we've been asleep. Now wake up. You are not a confused Southeast Asian. You are the sum of civilizations, the remix of ancient kings, and the product of DNA that survived volcanoes, colonizers, and rice shortages. So act like it. Before you swab your mouth again, open it and start telling the damn story. Let's stop pretending. You've said it. I've said it. Filipinos are the kindest people you'll ever meet. Yeah, we love saying that like it's a badge of honor, but deep down, don't you ever wonder if it's less about kindness, and more about survival? We weren't born kind. We were forced to be. We had to be the peacemakers in homes filled with yelling. The comedians in families full of unspoken trauma. We used humor like a shield and karaoke like therapy. Because when you don't have much, you make damn sure you hold on to each other. Ever wonder why Filipino parties feel like a family reunion, even when half the guests are strangers? It's not just hospitality. It's trauma response with pancit. Now here's the soul punch. We romanticize Filipino resilience like it's a personality trait, not a symptom. It's not normal to smile while carrying 3 generations worth of emotional debt. It's not noble to normalize self-sacrifice. It's just what we've been taught. But wait, don't cry just yet. Because this is where it gets interesting. You know how some cultures crumble under pressure? Filipinos sing through it. Like, literally. Typhoon wrecked your roof? Pull out the guitar. Heartbroken? Let's all sing Bake It Pa. Off key at 2 a.m. like it's a group exorcism. Music isn't just a vibe here. It's a coping mechanism dressed in melody. And don't even get me started on family. Filipino families are basically group chats that never shut up, even when nobody asked for the 89 forwarded messages. But here's the catch, they show up. Maybe with unsolicited advice and lukewarm Jollibee, but they show up. That's not weakness. That's stability built on emotional duct tape and Tupperware full of adobo. And when I saw this in person, not the Instagram version, but the real Filipino kindness, the one that opens homes, splits last rice grains, and still smiles while doing it, it hit me. This isn't just culture. It's survival engineering. Because when colonizers rewrote our history books and poverty became our playlist, we adapted. Not with guns or gold, but with joy. With community. With food, music, and UI kumain ka na. As a love language. And here's the mic drop. Kindness isn't a weakness. It's a resistance. A soft weapon we've sharpened over centuries of being underestimated. So the next time someone tells you Filipinos are always smiling, don't just nod. Tell them it's not because we're naive, it's because we remember everything, and still choose joy. That's not passive. That's power. So yeah, keep calling us kind. But understand that under that kindness is a rage we turned into rhythm. A pain we turned into poetry. And a strength that doesn't roar, it sings. And maybe, just maybe, that's why we survive. Because even when life's unfair, we still bring the damn karaoke. You ever stare at a culture so deeply that it stares back? Yeah, this was that moment. I didn't just learn about Filipinos. I felt them. Every smile hiding a sacrifice. Every joke built from broken glass. And maybe that's why it hits different, because behind the warmth is a storm they've already survived. Let's be honest, you didn't watch this far by accident. Something in you needed to hear this. Maybe to feel less alone. Maybe to finally see yourself without filters or feel-good fluff. So here's the deal. If this cracked open a thought you've been trying to bury, do something with it. Like, subscribe, comment, scream into the void if you have to, I'll wait. But don't scroll past like this didn't mean something. Because maybe, just maybe, the stories we ignore are the ones we're living. And I'm damn grateful you stayed till the end. If this deep dive hit you in the gut, or at least made you raise an eyebrow, smash that like button. Don't just lurk, subscribe so you never miss the truth no one else is willing to say. And share this with that one friend who's starving for something real.